I am Neil.
I'm Veronica. We fell in love when we were 16, and here we are talking about what life is all about for us. Thank you for joining us.
This is a Life Is podcast with Neil and Veronica.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Life Is with Neil and Veronica. We wish you and your loved ones a happy Easter weekend as we're coming off of a beautiful weather and time together that we had, and we wish that you had the same as well. In today's episode, Veronica and I were going back and forth on what we want to talk about, even up until the last minute, because we have so many thoughts and so many things that are coming in. But what we would love to talk about today is life is being bold. And as the saying goes, Veronica, the fortune favors the bold. And what that means in real terms, or when you can put it into an actual action, let's say, is when you take that action, when you put your foot forward in the first step of getting to where you want to go, or you're bold enough to make a change. You're bold enough to move yourself in a direction that you want to go to that maybe nobody has. And we've talked about a lot of things where we felt we were doing something bold, that we believed in, that we thought worked for us. And when you do that, we've felt the fortune, or we felt the, let's say, results in that, because we were bold enough to say, no matter what somebody else says, no matter what maybe people's opinions are, that we're not letting in. We're going to be bold enough to do this, and we're going to be, we're going to stand behind what we believe in, whether it works or it doesn't. And that's sort of where the entire saying, the fortune favors the bold, to allow yourself to do, say, choose whatever you believe in, and be bold enough to just do it. So I know Veronica had some thoughts pop into her head right before we were about to record this. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about life as being bold.
Well, that's just it, is I think that when we say life is about being bold, is about going for it. It's about taking action. It's about believing in yourself. So whereas before, I think for myself personally, I really equated the word bold, or bold really felt synonymous with like showboating or loud or obnoxious. Now I really see it as doing the thing that you really want to do, going for whatever it is you want to go for, taking that action, and really just believing in yourself. Because if you sit here and you think and you reflect on being bold and what it means, like what does it mean when we say life is about being bold? So if you think about yourself and your boldest self, I don't even know if that's a word, boldest, but like, what would it look like? What would you look like? What would you be going for? I also feel like it's also synonymous with like confidence in a sense, or no longer being afraid, no longer being scared. Like if you knew that it was going to pan out, if you knew what you were going for was going to happen, how quickly would you do it? How fast would you go for it? Where would the reservations be? Would you not have any? And I feel like being bold really is just equating like going for it. And I love that. I think latching on to that now. And I really just think about, again, I feel like there's so many parallels with our daughter and hitting those goals. So last time, we talked to you about how she was like hairline close. Well, guess what? Tonight, and we want to share with all of you, and maybe you're also cheering her on, is she got it. She got that new skill. She did it. And talk about like exponential growth and development and strength and being bold and going for it. I think we often can tell ourselves, oh, we can't do it, or there's a reason not to. So when you think about being bold and going for it, or like, what would it look like if you were going for the thing that was guaranteed? If it was a guarantee, how fast would you go for whatever it is? And I think because when things are guaranteed, like when you know for sure that it's going to happen, it feels like there's no risk. But I mean, there's so many cliches out there, right? Low risk, low reward, I think is one. Maybe I'm not saying that right again, but that's the thing is if there was a guarantee, but you have to put in the work. And we talked about that last time. So I really wanted to talk about life is about being bold because it's, sharing that narrative again that you need to believe in yourself and you need to just go for it. And it's going to feel uncomfortable now, but it's all about that yet. And if you can imagine yourself being there and doing whatever it is the bold thing is, and usually being bold is also getting you closer to like those big dreams, those big goals, and whatever that is.
Yeah, I agree. So you're talking about guarantees. And if it was guaranteed, we'd all go for it. And we all can pretty much say there's not a lot of guarantees in life, right? The saying is like, death, taxes, and whatever, right, are guaranteed. But they also say that you can guarantee this, is that the price of what it takes to work hard for it is going to be less than the price of you regretting not going for it. And so when you think about that, right, it's in your mind, you want to do it, and you're not bold enough to go for it. You're going to be guaranteed to regret or to think about that over time, about what if, what could have happened, right? And again, shooting on yourself. So don't give yourself the opportunity to do that. Be bold enough to try it. And again, that F word might come up, and that's okay, because you at least went for it and can continue to go for it and learn from whatever happened, whether it was a decision to change your career, whether it's a decision to remove yourself from a group of people that is no longer serving you, whatever it is. Being bold, again, like you talked about, and maybe this was how we grew up, was always maybe like looked down upon, like, ooh, that was bold, like, negatively, right? Like, that was bold for you to say, and was always like, well, you shouldn't do that, or like, you should have held back in a sense of being bold, because that was always maybe a negative connotation. When, you use it to your, not say advantage, but use it towards your own energy in achieving something, there's nothing negative about that. If anything, it's all positive, because you're trying to push yourself into a direction that you're no longer comfortable in a good way. And that's, again, how you are able to move forward in your journey or whatever it is that you're going for. So I totally agree. When you talked about the word bold, it was definitely like looked down on to be bold when we were growing up. And I think that changing that narrative of that word or that definition of that word really needs to happen in conversations, because when you are bold in the right way, it can move you so far into action and achievement.
Yeah, and the F word that Neil was referring to before is failure. And failure is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, we're trying now to shine more of a light on it in terms of learning opportunities and what you can gain from going for something. And even if you fail, right? So if you want to be bold and you're going for something, and let's say you don't make whatever it is that that goal might have been, there's so much learning along the way. There's so much that you can still gain from going for it. There's so much growth that can happen in that. And there's a lot on like our mental load, right? Like we're constantly, I don't know about you, Neil. I don't know about all of you that are listening, but gosh, can I spend a lot of time in circles in my mind? And like picture like Venn diagram upon Venn diagram upon Venn diagram and circles and all sorts of directions and speeds and everything else, right? And I think the problem with that, in a sense, like, so if I were to give an example of, wanting to go for something and spending the time in thinking about actually going for something rather than taking action and just going for it, like I really equate it to the example of like when I online shop, I spend a lot of time scrolling for things and trying to decide and thinking about all the decisions and thinking about all the options. Whereas, if I go into a store, I'm like, okay, here it is. This is what I want. I mean, I may or may not. It depends, right? But point being is that like we can spin in circles a lot. And, sometimes we can be confused. And sometimes it's just, again, thinking about everyone else besides ourselves when we're thinking of what it might be to be bold and to go for something. Maybe it's an outfit. Maybe it is a really big goal. Like maybe it's a skill. Maybe it's just simply saying something that you're not comfortable usually saying might feel bold. And I think that's a lot of it too, is about comfort. So right now, something that feels bold for me might be something I'm not very comfortable with. It's about like that yet. And, let's say fast forward 6 months from now, well, that might not be so bold for me anymore because I've, launched myself into doing it. I'm getting comfortable with it. I went for it, like whatever that outcome is. I really think it's also about being comfortable, not only with going for it, but just the comfort in whatever that is and being bold is.
Yeah, I was giggling because, we talked about outfits, being bold in outfits. And of course, our youngest is our most boldest when it comes to outfit choices and just, not caring what anybody else thinks and just being happy in what she wears. And, we can all take lessons from those around us, whether it's our children or our friends who maybe are a little bit more bolder than we are in their decisions or choices. And just knowing that that's okay.
Like for that outfit specifically, we're talking like t-shirt and pantyhose kind of thing, or whatever you want to call it.
Like a gymnastics leotard, which looks like a bathing suit over top of pants, and just rocking that because she wants to. And
just go for it.
Absolutely. But I think back, some of the bold choices, right? And sometimes you don't even know in the moment that you are being bold, that what you're doing really is a bold decision. And for me, I look back at when I was maybe forced, or it was given me the opportunity, or the opportunity was given to me to make a choice, to take a career change away from what I had studied in school, what I had started out doing right out of school. And to me, like, I didn't think it was a bold choice, right? But I had the opportunity to stay within that career path. I had that opportunity to continue on within that direction. But with your support and your outside viewpoint and wisdom, that, sometimes when you're in it, you can't see it. That bold choice to be able to say, like, it doesn't matter what I studied in school. I'm making a switch. I'm, 90-degree turn or whatever it is, away from what I was doing. And I'm going to start maybe from the bottom in this area. And I'm going to work my skills up in a new area that I can make further strides in. So for me, I think back to that bold decision, which at the time I would have never labeled it at that, but it was a bold decision to say, like, I'm moving on from that and I'm going in this direction for me and my future family to be able to have more of what I know I value and want, and to really start to push myself into a new direction. I wouldn't be on the journey I am now when it comes to personal growth and development, or whether it's, where we're at as parents and family, had I not made that bold decision to say, I've invested in this, I've committed to this career path, but it's no longer serving me, and I'm going to go in another direction. So I'd love to hear your viewpoint, because that was a pretty interesting experience, to say the least.
Yeah, well, for that example specifically, there's even different elements of bold in parts of that, right? Either way that you would have gone, for example, there were parts of either that were bold. I mean, the choice that you ended up making probably overall was the biggest bold element of it, because it was the biggest change in a sense. And that can be scary. There was a lot of risk in that. Had you had stayed in that career path, I mean, part of it would have been bold because we also would have had to move, and, lots of change would have come with that too. And so you have to weigh these things out. And I think at the time, like, it was bold, it was scary. But it's also, it's about like assessing too about what it means for you individually, right? Because what you do that might be looked at or viewed upon as bold, maybe in a negative way, potentially, or whether it's synonymous with like the amount of risk or the amount of change, other people can view things as bold, but maybe you don't, right? Or maybe something feels bold for you, and maybe to someone else it might not, depending on what their baseline is too. But ultimately, going back to that, it's kind of that messaging about that best decision was the best one you made, and it was the one that you made for you. And, when you were information gathering for that, right? And part of it was having conversations with me. It was kind of weighing out the options and figuring things out. But ultimately, you made the best decision for you. And it is amazing to see where you are now for that, for sure. And, in my personal example, I kind of did something similar. So you might not know this fact. I actually just shared this with like a more recent friend, because it was one of those like, tell me something that would totally shock me. And I'm like, well, I went to school for computer engineering and I spent one semester, and then I switched to child and youth and family studies. And they were like, what? I was like, I know. I apparently do these bold things all the time. Right? Like, you just leave these career choices, or you make these big steps, or these big things, or you make these big decisions that do seem really bold, because again, bold might mean scary. It might mean the unknown. It might mean being uncomfortable. And ultimately, all of those things is, if you're going for it and you're making the best decision that you are making for you, and you are surrounding yourself with the cheerleaders and the people that are going to cheer you on or help you grow with all of that, or be a bit of like a safety net and an encouragement in a sense, right? So you might shoot for something, you might miss, but if you think of them being like a safety net and cheering you on and all the things, making you realize all the things along the way that you still could have gained from something. Like, what a great viewpoint to also have in that. And I think, we are often wired to fear failure and to run away from scary things and fear. But often fear is like the unknown, right? There's so much comfort in like guarantees. There's so much comfort in knowing. So using the example of our daughter that hit a skill, right? We didn't know. She didn't know. How long is it actually going to take? How much work am I actually going to have to put in? How many times am I going to fall? Am I going to injure myself at any point in time? Like, there's all of these possibilities in any parallel of a scenario that you can give yourself, right? Or that you're experiencing or that you're going for. I mean, there's two, maybe more lists, but let's say 2 lists at any time, right? We always talk about like pros and cons or whatever you want to talk about with like making a decision and, going for whatever it is. And there is a list of scary. I think if you're going to be bold, if you're going to go for something and you talk about like that risk and the reward and, how much you can get out of something, there's always a list of scary. This is the first time I've said it, but I actually like labeling it like that because they're the scaries. And I just feel like when you listen to yourself and when you're excited, let that override the scaries and find things to counteract the scaries. And, we do talk about lists often and checking things off and crossing them off and what that looks like. And I feel like in this visual scenario, like get that Sharpie, black out the scary, because if you think about it, sometimes you can still see through it a little bit. So you still acknowledge it. You know that it's kind of there. It's a possibility, but highlight what you can gain out of going for the bold.
Absolutely. And I think another part, and what the experts that I've listened to say, when you list out things that give you anxiousness or that give you sort of, that scary feeling, and you write it down, right? Not only does it get it off your brain and put it onto paper, which helps, as we've talked about before, right? It releases that mental load. But what you can also do in that they say, is then you can start to look at what elements of the things that scare me are out of my control and what elements that scare me are within my control. Take those ones that are out of your control and take that black Sharpie and you can just black them right out, right? So you can't even see them anymore because they're out of your control. So you shouldn't even be thinking about them in that sense. And then take that highlighter and focus on what you can control and then make a list of how you can control it, right? And the other thing that I was thinking about as you were talking, Veronica, was in the sense of being bold, taking action, going for it, however you want to describe it, is you're never too young and you're never too old to do this, right? So if you're listening to this, no matter what your age is, no, it's just a number, right? It has nothing for or against you when it comes to being bold, dreaming big, taking action for whatever it is you want, whatever decision that you may be weighing. And it's just, it goes to show you that make that decision for you. And when you make that decision, not once should anyone ever have to say, well, but how old are you? Like, that should never factor into that decision. It's always you, your relationship, and how you're feeling about it that goes into it. So don't let that part ever hold you back from being bold.
I love that because it can apply to so much. And I think, again, it just kind of goes into like the quantifying of like whether you can or you can't. And it's true because sometimes, people have something to say about everything. That's just it. I did learn in a course once that, like, unfortunately, naturally, we are judgy beings because it was like a safety mechanism at one point. And, you had to kind of judge to see, like, for safety, like, what is this situation all about? And people have something to say about everything, Is 3 kids too many? Is it not enough? Are they too close in age? Like, we got together when we were too young, blah, blah, blah. There's an opinion about everything. And that's where, again, you have to drown out the noise. And I think a lot of that noise is sometimes what stops us from going for whatever that is. And, when you think about all of the time that you can spend thinking in those circles, thinking about everything else, the non-action part of things, like spend a little bit of time thinking like, wow, like what you could have done then, and then start doing whatever it is that is going to get you closer to wherever you might want to be, wherever your boldest self is.
Absolutely. And I think about where you're at in your journey, in your community, right? And doing all the bold things that you do each and every day with the people in your community, and what kind of impression that makes to others that are watching you, that are looking at you, and how you don't allow that noise or that opinion to affect you, because what you're doing is what's best for you and your community and all that stuff. And it goes to the whole point of, again, the best decision you make is the one for you. And I just I admire that part of where you're at in your journey, because I know when we were younger, like, in myself included, like, those things would affect us. And it's hard when you're an adolescent to not let that affect you, right? Because that is your time for acceptance. That is your time for approval. That is your time for seeking, whatever it is that you want from others, without knowing that you can find it within yourself. And sometimes it comes quicker for other people. Sometimes it takes a longer time to learn that. And hopefully, if anybody's listening to that and you're still wavering on that, hopefully you can take and draw from this, knowing that it's okay to be bold in your decision for yourself to do whatever it is, and not to let maybe those old thought patterns or highways that you haven't knocked off or rerouted yet, to knowing that you can be bold and take action for whatever it is that you want.
And that's the thing. So own the bold, just own it, do it, go for it. Find that one person that's going to cheer you on to go for it. Hopefully you have many more than one. And maybe if you don't feel confident in having the one, then have the confidence in yourself to cheer yourself on and to go for it. It was interesting because I was having a conversation with a friend, and we were talking very specifically about certain scenarios. And, even in our conversation today, Neil, like, we talked about different ways that maybe bold might mean. So is it like an outfit? Is it a conversation? Is it a really big goal? Is it going and doing something? So it's almost like a label, I feel like. And there's something about labels that I just want to like burn and throw away and put in the life is garbage, because, someone might be like, oh, that's really bold of you to do. And it's like, yeah, but I want to do that. And what's it to you? But in terms of like a conversation, so for a very long time, I would not speak up for myself. I would not draw my boundaries. I would not make my boundaries known. There's a lot of that used to happen. And, it was interesting because I love when you talked about like the bubbling, boiling water. It was interesting when you said it, because I hadn't heard of it at the time when you had mentioned it in the podcast. But I did have a conversation. It was actually prior to that, analogy that you were sharing with us and with me. And it was that I actually said, okay, I am not going to respond to this conversation right now. I'm clearly not thinking straight. I actually don't think I can form my words properly. And I don't think I can, draw that boundary and let it be known properly. And I'm not even doing myself justice in that sense. So I waited, I gathered my thoughts, and I did. I said it. And for all of you listening, I did not even attach a sorry to it. I was so freaking proud of myself for not saying sorry to a boundary that I had set, because I'm like, I'm not sorry. That is my boundary. However you feel is how you are going to feel. So, when you think of this example, when I think of this example, it was interesting because I was sharing it almost like a play-by-play, because this is what I do. So to those of you listening, this is what you get when you get a story from Veronica, is you get a very detailed play-by-play. And my friend, because we hadn't spoken in a while, right? So this is like friend that knew me, I don't know, 5, 8, 10 years ago, let's say. We're having this conversation. I'm like, this is how it went. Again, play-by-play. And they were like, wow, I am so proud of you, with like the undertone or underlying message of like, that was bold of you to do that in a sense, right? And I kind of giggled at that. I'm pretty sure I laughed out loud, because that's just what I do. I also laugh all the time. And, with the underlying message of like, wow, that's bold, because like, number one, it was a change from what they were used to, what I was used to kind of saying out loud, drawing those boundaries, all of that. But I think they also said like, you have grown like so much as a person, or like, that is amazing that you're doing that. Because I think 5, 8, 10 years ago, they were the ones that were cheering me on in terms of like, you should start setting those boundaries, or you should, speak up for yourself. A lot of times, if we rewind way back to high school, there was this constant broken record, honestly, of our friends saying, Veronica, you need to bid her up. And I was like, number one, I don't think I know how. Number two, like, but why, kind of thing. But yeah. So also, just like in terms of that story, it was interesting because it's like, that is my new normal now, though, right? I no longer feel bold for doing that, because I've gotten comfortable with it. I've gotten more confident in it. I know that I feel better when I do that, and that I'm taking care of myself more, and I'm drawing those boundaries. And so that is no longer bold for me, what once may have been bold.
Yeah, you keep pushing that forward. You keep pushing your bar of what is bold up in the best way possible. And when you need to move it even further for a situation, for a decision, an action, whatever it is, you know that you can do it based off your past history, based off of your track record of being bold and taking action, and knowing that it's okay to do that. That it's a positive thing, that you're changing, you're growing, and you're pushing yourself to be better for whatever it is. So I totally agree that changing the narrative about what is bold, giving yourself the permission to being bold is all a great thing. And I'm so glad that we brought up this topic, because it's just something that, again, needs to be talked about. And hopefully when you're listening to this or watching this, it resonates with you in that you can, 1, find a time that you were bold, 2, know that next time you need to be bold, that it's okay to do it, and 3, to just continue to push yourself each and every time that you want or need to do a bold action or decision. Because in the end, whether or not you fail or succeed, you at least didn't sit in that comfort of not going for it or not being bold. Because as we talked about earlier, I can guarantee you're going to want to do it next time. So I think that it was such a great, thoughtful topic, Veronica, and I'm so grateful that we ended up landing on this one this time. So I wanted to thank everybody for allowing us to share these stories and this topic. And I just want to remind everybody, as always, that life is more beautiful with all of you. And we look forward to speaking with you again next time.